We are back. Our captain, Devin Knotts, had a big week last week, but we are here for week 13 to give you all your must plays. The Football Guys DFS show has all your cash and GPP options for this week's main slate. And I'm again joined. Finally, the crew is back together, joined with our captain, Devin Knotts, and with Phil Alexander as well. Let's, Phil, kick it off. How are you doing, Phil? How was your holiday weekend?
Doing great. The Thanksgiving slate treated me a little bit better than the weekend slate, but overall it was a profitable week 12, and I'm looking forward to week 13.
I tried to tell you not to take James Conner.
You did.
I mean, sometimes like just because the Sims or the projections tell you to take a certain guy, like let's just be a little smarter than that. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight.
All right, let's lead it off.
Not a shot at Phil, just shot at other sites that had James Conner projected way too high. We'll just put it that way.
We will not blame Phil for any of that. So we'll go ahead. We'll start our week off with the games of the week. Devin, what games are you watching this week?
I think San Francisco, Philadelphia is the one that like everybody's going to be looking at. I think that it's, it's we're going to talk about quarterbacks there, and certainly I think both of the quarterbacks are in play. There's a couple other ones. I think that, gosh, we're not going to get there just yet. I think Washington, Miami is interesting as well. I think that's the other safe one. I think there's some that are under the radar. Detroit, New Orleans could get a little sneaky. Denver, Houston, like what version of Russell Wilson we get is always a week-to-week mystery. But that's sort of it. I mean, it's another one of these weird slates where some of the best teams are on either prime time or on bye. So we're in the part of the season where it's just garbage offenses. And this year is a little bit different because it feels like there's a lot more injuries to quarterbacks. Actually, I know there are a lot more injuries to quarterbacks, a lot less injuries at other positions, which is interesting. So, some years we have like these running backs that are 4,500 every single week that you just like have to take. And we really haven't seen much of that this year. It's been at the quarterback position, so it's made it challenging, but we're here to get it solved.
Yeah, and I mean, we know from fantasy that, you can replace a running back production relatively easily, but that quarterback brings the whole ceiling of the offense down. Phil, do you have other games that you're watching this week?
Yeah, I like this slate. Devin definitely hit on the top games to target, but overall, it kind of feels like we've got 4 games that look like slogs. We've got 4 that could be potential shootouts that Devin had already mentioned. And then there's a couple in the middle that are somewhat interesting. So it's kind of nicely balanced. Those 2 somewhat interesting games I have marked down as Arizona at Pittsburgh, middling 41.5 point total, and then Titans at Colts 42.5. I think there are some intriguing pieces of both of those games, and they at least have the possibility of going over those totals.
Yeah, I think the other one to keep an eye on is maybe the Chargers going against the hapless Patriots. That might be a big scoring opportunity there. And then potentially Tampa Bay against Carolina. We've seen historically Tampa Bay have some big outputs against Carolina in the past, and Carolina is really struggling. All right, we're going to dive into the cash game plays. But first, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. Feel free to comment with your questions on this week's slate. And let's go with cash game plays. And Phil, I'm going to have you lead off this one. Who are your cash game quarterbacks for this week?
For me, it's really Brock Purdy again. It's kind of funny. Like, there's this big debate amongst analysts over whether Brock Purdy is good and deserves credit for what's going on with the San Francisco offense that averages 28 points per game, or whether he's more of like a function of that offense that just has to kind of pull a lever and not mess things up. DraftKings
anyone who says he's not good is just stupid.
Yeah,
it's really an unintelligent argument.
Yeah,
the guy's in the league in completion percentage. Like, let's just because he was drafted in the 7th round, let's give him some credit.
Yeah, well, one organization that refuses to give him credit is DraftKings, because his price is always in this like $5,700 to $6,100 range. So, traditionally we look for that 3x salary multiplier in cash games. I don't know that that's really true anymore, but Purdy has 4x this salary in each of his previous three prior to last week. And the Eagles have allowed 65% more DraftKings points than league average to opposing quarterbacks in the last 5 weeks. So monster games to Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, and Sam Howell. Um, I'm kind of not even looking at anyone else.
Devin, do
Yeah,
you
it's
have anybody
pretty.
else?
It's pretty for me. I mean, if you wanted to go, if you're in like a 3-person or 5-person tournament and you wanted to be a little bit different, I think Sam Howell, just because he throws a ridiculous amount of volume at 6,200, they're going to be behind. He threw for what 300 on the dot, I think, last week against Dallas without having it in front of me. In a game they lost 45-10. So 6,200, you could certainly do worse than that. But I mean, it's pretty much Purdy and just move on. What's flat? Hold on,
Flacco,
4,600.
4,600.
We'll get to GPPs and talk about Joe Flacco.
Okay.
Ugh, we don't have to. I mean, we could, I guess.
He's the best Browns quarterback since 1962.
Most accomplished. We can
No, Brian Sipe in 1980 did win an MVP, so I have to give Brian Sipe his one good year, but yeah, it's bad. Anyway,
So in running backs, I think that we're all probably on the mindset of Zach Moss is a must play, I assume. Who are you putting in your lineup next to him, Devin?
yeah, I think Zach Moss is certainly the guy. But looking elsewhere, I think that if you can get, I mean, it's tough because if you can get Christian McCaffrey, you might want to do it just because like the value that you get there is every single week. It seems to be, he's scoring touchdowns or he's going over 100 yards. Rachaad White going up against Carolina, like I'm just starting players against Carolina where possible. And this is a weird game for Tampa Bay because they're 4-7, 4-7 or 4-8, 4-7, I believe. So if they lose this game, they're even in the NFC South. It's like curtains. It's like night. You're not going like 8-9 could win that division, but they're not going 4-1 over their next 5 games. So it's like they could be looking at Kyle Trask after this week if they lose. It's really a must win for Tampa Bay, and I think that the way to beat Carolina is on the ground. So I think he's interesting. And then Bijan Robinson, I think, is intriguing as well. The Jets have this like perception that they are an elite defense, which against the pass they are. But against the run, they're allowing the 5th most points to opposing running backs, which is interesting. And we've seen Bijan Robinson, 6,700 is not a horrible price. We've seen him have more of a role after his suspension, and I won't entertain any other argument outside of it being a suspension. Earlier this year. And then one more name. No, we'll save it for GPPs.
Phil, what do you got?
You can tell we didn't have a show last week. Like I'm bumbling over my words. I'm in like preseason form. We have a dog that
got the good plays this week. We're just the little bit clunky on the delivery. It's okay.
Yeah, so there's really not too much to cover yet for cash games aside from what Devin already mentioned. I mean, Zach Moss is the free square. Rachaad White looks pretty clearly to me like the next best play at 6,300. The only other running back I might want to consider for cash, and I don't know that I really want to do it just because he's a member of the New England Patriots, but Ramondre Stevenson, who I actually pivoted off James Conner in my cash lineup last week to Ramondre, and that ended up working out pretty well. I did that at the 11th hour. His workloads have gotten really good, 25 rush attempts plus targets in each of the last 2 games. So if you need 300 to get down from White to fit somebody else into your lineup, I think Stevenson makes some sense. But I do have a better projection on White. So that's the way that I'm leaning right now.
Is Javonte Williams this week's James Conner?
I had half an eye on him, but yeah, the other players around him in that range, it feels like easily go other directions.
The price just seems high.
Yeah.
And Houston's run defense hasn't been bad. They held Travis Etienne to 56 yards on 20 carries last week. It just seems like a trap, and he's going to be popular, I think, just because he fits into that mold. I mean, 21 carries and 18 carries. Yeah, he's catching a little bit of passes, but I don't know. I think he might be.
I would argue for him in tournaments. In
I
fact,
agree. I think that's fine.
I just might.
I mean, if you're in the same ballpark, I would rather touch the Steelers running backs, to be honest with you, than Javonte Williams. So going up against Arizona. But let's go over to wide receivers now. Phil, who are you looking at wide receiver? How are you building that lineup out?
I'm starting with Tyreek Hill again. Hill told us before the season he was going to have 2,000 receiving yards. Here we are in week 13, and he's pacing for 2,046, which would break the single season record. We're seeing him play through nicks and bruises, and he just doesn't ever have less than 12 targets. I think he's very aware of that record. I think the Dolphins are very aware of him getting it, and I don't think that Washington is going to be the team that stops them. When the other team has an alpha receiver, I mean, the Commanders just roll up in the corner and wilt. A.J. Brown in 2 games against them this year has 18 catches, 300 yards, and 4 touchdowns. DJ Moore hung that. It was like a 230-yard, 3-touchdown game on them. And I see Tyreek Hill very much in that mold this week. I guess there's an argument for him or McCaffrey, and I'm certainly open to McCaffrey, but I think Hill. I just don't see how he fails in that game against Washington. For my second receiver spot, it's either Michael Pittman or Brandon Ayuk. The optimals are going to prefer Pittman because he gets the target volume.
Yeah.
I think I like Ayuk for a couple of reasons. Number one, I see Josh Downs as the better value on the Colts, and I don't want to stack Colts pass catchers in a cash game lineup. Stacking Purdy with Ayuk also introduces a little bit of volatility into my cash game lineup, but I think it does also increase my upside, and it doubles my exposure to a great offense in the best game on the slate rather than the Colts Titans game, which I wouldn't be shocked if it was like a 7-3 final. And Ayuk has a great matchup. And really, when you search the game logs, I mean, their floors are kind of similar. So yeah, it's those two guys, Downs, and I'll probably end up flexing a wide receiver this week. It's going to be one of Deontay Johnson, Terry McLaurin, or Cortland Sutton. It depends on how the chips fall and if I have enough salary to get up over Deontay Johnson, which I would like to do.
Devin, you got a different direction you're taking it? Or are you hitting Tyreek Hill and building around him too?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to play Tyreek Hill. I think that he's going to be a difference maker. And certainly Washington's secondary is it's 1A or 1B between them and the Chargers as far as the worst secondary in football. I go back and forth almost every week in the rushing and passing matchups as far as who the worst of the bunch is. Couple guys. I like George Pickens this week. A little more than Josh Downs. He's $300 cheaper. He look, the targets aren't there, which is why he's not going to show up on the optimals. But 58 yards on 3 catches last week against Cincinnati in sort of this weird game that was neither team wanted to win, but ultimately that's how the Steelers win all of their games in these just slog type fests. But if I'm going with Hill, I need to save some money somewhere. Demario Douglas, I think, is at least intriguing. Bailey Zappi, you would think is going to inject some life into this Patriots passing attack. I mean, he has the single season record for passing yards in college, so he can throw the ball a little bit. And Douglas has nine or more targets in each of his last 2 games. And then Pittman's fine. I think he's a guy who, he's fine. There's nothing special about him. There's nothing bad about him. One last guy I will look at, and it's 4,900. I think the price is way too low. I might prefer him over George Pickens now that I think about it. It's Drake London, and London is interesting because we saw Desmond Ritter. He threw the ball 21 times last week. London had 7 of those 21 targets. And if we go back to when right before Ritter was benched, he had 12 targets for 125 yards and 78 yards on 9 targets. So it's clear that Ritter is locking onto him. And, the Jets defense is elite, but to be able to get those targets, I think at 4,900 is at least intriguing compared to Downs or Pickens, who I just prefer London's talent over those two.
Yeah, I
Real
think that
quick
you
on Demario Douglas, I didn't get a chance to look at practice reports today for the
No
Patriots.
concussion.
No concussion, so
No, he's still in protocol.
he's still in protocol. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like him too if he's active for sure. I think he's right there with Josh Downs for consideration.
If he doesn't play, are they going to throw? Who are they going to throw to?
Juju and Parker, they're going to run it through the running backs. I mean, that's kind of what they did
Yeah.
last week. It was Stevenson and a little bit of Zeke, but Stevenson really took over the snap share last week. Zeke got the ball when he was in, but they really tried to just take the air out of the ball. But the Giants allowed them to do that. I don't know if the Chargers run defense has been better than it has been in the past. And yeah, it's just going to be a slog. It's going to be a struggle for their offense to move the ball. I think we can go to tight ends now. Devin, what do you got for tight ends? Where are you going?
So it depends. If Dorian Thompson-Robinson starts, David Njoku is the guy at 4,100. He's the clear number one target for Thompson-Robinson. Dorian Thompson-Robinson's theory of not losing his job is just to throw 5-yard passes and not turn the ball over. At one point in the game, he was averaging 2.2 yards per attempt and completing. I think he was 7 for 10. So Njoku has been the top guy over the last 2 games. Amari Cooper has been a non-factor. 7 receptions for 56, 6 for 59 over the last 2 weeks. So if Thompson-Robinson starts, I think Njoku is the clear-cut guy. If he doesn't, that's where it gets interesting. It's ugly. We can't really spend up because it's hard because of wanting to play Tyreek Hill at 9,600. But Logan Thomas or Hunter Henry, maybe. The theory, if Demario Douglas misses, they have to throw to somebody. Maybe it's Hunter Henry. Logan Thomas, same sort of thing where they're going to be behind most of the game. Maybe they'll have to pepper him with targets, but it's Phil, maybe you have something because if Flacco starts, maybe I just have to play Njoku either way. I don't know.
Well, I'm old enough to remember Todd Heap, Owen Daniels, and Dennis Pitta. Joe Flacco could make use of a tight end still, I'm pretty sure. I think Njoku's fine. I personally don't have enough room for him in the lineup that I've got here as a placeholder. So I settled on Cade Otton at 3,200 just because he fits. He's got at least 8 DraftKings points in 5 of his last 6. No reason he can't do his usual, 4 for 40. And if he manages to get a touchdown in there, then that's great. And then one injury note that I did catch is Dalton Schultz is still out of practice with a hamstring injury. And we saw that in the fourth quarter of the game last week. Brevin Jordan outsnapped him, and everybody was wondering what was going on. And it ended up being that hamstring. So min price Brevin Jordan. I don't love it, but it's min priced. He's at least got some athleticism, and he showed some potential as a rookie. Not so much in the last couple of years, but I'd be willing to go there, I think, if it got me up to a better wide receiver 3 or flex in cash.
Is Pat Fryermuth? Let's see it again first before we put him into lineups, because if we get another game like that, this price is not going to be at 4,300 for very long, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, he's a guy who's interesting. I'll say that, because the one theory, however, is that this Arizona team has quit, and particularly their defense. Their offense looks fine, like they're staying competitive, but their defense has been atrocious for a while. And they held Mark Andrews to 4 for 40, Jake Ferguson 5 for 48. It's not a bad play. I think he's fine. You just know what you're getting, and it's Kenny Pickett. Granted, I just recommended a tight end who has Dorian Thompson-Robinson as their starter. So, like, I just prefer Njoku very slightly over him.
Sure. All right. So make sure to head to footballguys.com/plans to become a Hall of Fame subscriber. Hall of Fame subscribers get access to all DFS content for less than $20 monthly. And I'm pretty sure we have some sales going on to help you on that annual price. But we might have moved out of that window. Keep an eye open for those types of things. But again, you can grab a monthly membership and help you through the rest of this year. Make sure to check that out. We're going to move to GPP plays now. And Phil, where are you going for quarterbacks on your GPP plays?
Well, you guys know me. The first thing that I look for in a GPP quarterback is how many gloves does this guy have on? And Mr. Kenny Pickett, he could be like an ambidextrous isotoner model. He's got a pair of gloves. I love him. He's 5,100 this week. It's evident the Steelers are more willing to take the training wheels off of Pickett now that Matt Canada's out of town. We saw that materialize last week. The results were there against the Bengals defense, season highs of 278 yards, 73% completion rate. He is backed up in the touchdown department. He just can't seem to get there. None in his last 3 games, only 1 in his last 6. I just feel like variance has to turn in his direction, and he's eventually going to have to pass for multiple scores. And he's got the Arizona defense. I am going to have more than one Kenny Pickett stack going into tournaments this week. And aside from that, I think you've got to have some Tua, even though they'll be popular and expensive to stack. There are ways to get different. Go ahead, Devin. Talk to me about Kenny
Biting
Pickett.
my tongue.
All right. So continuing on.
We'll make sure to hit Baker Mayfield here so we can really set Devin up nicely.
This coffee might just be like thrown across the room. If that's the next name that you mentioned.
Now, Tua lineups you have to get different with, but there are ways you could overstack the game. You could throw
Tua Waddle, just avoid Hill.
Yep, yeah, that's one way. Avoid Hill. Throw Durham Smythe into your Tua Hill lineup. There's plenty of ways to get that done. Last name on my list is Derek Carr. I was somewhat surprised with all these Saints wide receiver injuries. The total on that Lions Saints game has actually gone up since it opened. And Carr, they should be trailing in this one. I have his projection right there with guys like Minshew, Mayfield, and Sam Howell, but I think all of those guys in that price tier are going to attract more popularity. So I like Carr. I think he's capable of the 300-yard bonus and a couple of touchdowns in any given week. I'm hoping Chris Olave plays, but if he doesn't, it just gets cheaper to stack Carr with Jawan Johnson at 3,400. And then if Olave is out and all these other wide receivers are out, Alvin Kamara probably becomes his top receiver and an interesting part of that stack. So I kind of like how different your lineup could get with Carr in there.
Devin, you going different anywhere?
I'm so happy Joe Flacco is back in the NFL. Like every time.
Him too.
For those of you who play on my fantasy league, you know the Joe Flacco saying where they have the announcement and then the guy is literally screaming at you, Joe Flacco. I just broke some microphones there. I've been doing this way too long that I know like the sayings of like David Njoku's David NJOKU on my fantasy league. So Flacco. Let's talk about him. 285 yards in 4 of his last 5 games. I'm gonna kill that dog. Comment what Phil's dog's name is. Let's get a comment below, and whoever guesses it right, I'll give $100 to. Friends and family are ineligible. Flacco, 285 yards or more in 4 of his last 5 starts. Why do people hate him? At
He's elite. I don't know.
4,600. He has arm talent. Like, he can't move at all, but he can throw the rock a little bit. And going up against the Rams they're an okay defense. They're nothing special, but the opportunity that you get at 4,600, he's certainly a better quarterback than Kenny Pickett. And if he throws for 250 and 2, you're in like really good shape at 4,600. So I don't see how he's not incredibly popular, to be honest.
One other name I like, Gardner Minshew at 5,300. So the last time they played the Titans was when Anthony Richardson was injured. So he went out right before halftime, and that's when Minshew came in the second half and threw for 155 yards in the second half. So I think you can extrapolate that pretty easily. That's over 300 yards, and the Titans have been, gashed through the air. So adding Gardner Minshew there, I think at 5,300 is a good price range on DraftKings. Let's go to running backs, Devin. Who are your running backs?
Is our best friend.
That's right.
Works every time.
I think my daughter can even do that math.
What?
I said I think my daughter can even do that math.
There you go. Running backs. Kyren Williams, I think, is the first name that pops for me. A lot of people are very similar to the Jets. A lot of people are going to be thinking, hey, Cleveland's defense, I don't really want to go against. But this Cleveland defense is incredibly banged up, and the results are starting to show that they're struggling. So last week, Samaje Perine and Javonte Williams had 110 total yards, 110 rushing yards combined. Jalen Warren and Najee Harris had 164. And the Browns still have one of the best pass defenses in the NFL. So Kyren Williams looked great last week. I think that at 7,200, he's going to be going under the radar. I do think Rachaad White, again, he's going to get popular, but just start running backs against Carolina. Bijan Robinson, we talked about. Jalen Warren, I like a lot. It seems like he's going to start building up and getting more of that role in Pittsburgh. Conversely, I think you could fade that narrative and take Najee Harris again. But and then, Zach Moss, I think, is just a must play, even at 46. Like, I don't see how you fade him, to be honest. He's going to be 55% rostered probably, and I think that's too low. You're on mute.
Phil, you're muted, bud.
Sorry, the dog got me. My note on Zach Moss says I'm either going to play 100% or 0%. And if I were forced to decide tonight, it's 100%. Because I think he is that good of a play. Just going back to the workloads he was getting in weeks 2 through 5, I think he was like the number 4 overall running back during that span. And he's like the 28th priced running back this week. I mean, the spot doesn't get much better than that. So I wouldn't have a problem with anyone who says I'm putting him in every single lineup because, listen, if I'm saying that, that means that there is a path to beat a large chunk of the field by not playing him. But I think that, like Devin said, sometimes the play is so good, it just warrants the free square status. So I think you have to play Moss too.
Are you really beating the field? Like, what's his floor? 6-7 points?
Yeah.
Yeah. If he's
really like beating, I just don't know that like you're actually beating the field even if he scores 6 or 7 points. Like, you're okay. Congrats, he got 1.5x, but now I can get McCaffrey and Hill if I want, or spend all the way up at quarterback. And I just don't think there's that mid tier that is strong enough this week to justify fading him. I don't know.
That is a fair argument because it does depend on the opportunity cost of who else you could get into the lineup when you play him. And you're probably right. The middle tier isn't great. I mentioned Javonte Williams there. Um, the only reason that he appealed to me is that it seems like people want to play Russell Westbrook against Houston this week. So I'd rather go the other way with Williams. I don't think he'll get too popular, maybe 12 to 15% coming off a letdown game. Samaje Perine has outscored him the last two games, but that's been super fluky. Last week, Williams set his season high in snap share, route participation, and target share. So I think those are all good indicators that he could have a big game. We mentioned the Pittsburgh backs. I think I'd go with Harris over Warren. Jalen Warren got up to 14% in last week's Millie Maker on DraftKings, which was a surprise to me. And now we've got the Arizona matchup. And I know he disappointed those people who played him, but it really seems to me like people want Jalen Warren to happen a lot. And Najee Harris is kind of the boring guy that they want to go away. And he's just continuing to 3x his salary. You know, if he happens to score 2 touchdowns this week, he'll probably end up being like half as owned as Warren. So that's pretty much my main thoughts there for GPPs is play Moss, and you could attack that mid tier with guys like Harris and Javante.
Raheem Mostert, I think too. Is a name that we haven't mentioned yet. That's one that going against Washington, I think he's got a great opportunity to get into the end zone a couple times. That's a higher salary, and there might be other guys you like more in that range. Kyron Williams being one of them. But I think that game sets up nicely for him, assuming that Devin Achane is out. We can move over to wide receivers now. Phil, who you got for wide receivers?
Yeah, so I was willing to play Brandon Ayuk in cash, and currently around the industry, he's projected for sub 10% ownership pretty much across the board. So at this point in the week, I love him in tournaments, but I think that everybody's a little too low on that. I think he's going to steam up as we get closer to Sunday because the field. One thing that I've noticed throughout the years is that they consistently double count great matchups, even though they're already baked into projections. And Ayuk's matchup is very good. We know that he's one of a handful of guys who could go for 30 plus, and we know that that's a game that people want to target. So I still want to play him because I think he's a good play, but he's projecting a little bit better right now than he probably should once those ownership projections crystallize. Devonte Smith is the next game on my next player on my list because I actually like the two of them, Ayuk and Devonte Smith, in the same lineup together as kind of a secondary stack. This assumes Dallas Goedert is out and he's missed practice both days, so I think he will be. But Devonte Smith is 8 targets in each of his last 2 games. Goddard has missed both of those, and the target shares in those games were 30% and 40%. So he's getting elite usage without Goddard in the lineup, and I think he makes for a great play. And I mentioned McLaurin and Sutton earlier. I think they're fine for cash or GPPs. They're right in that 5,500, 5,400 range. So moderate prices, moderate ownership, but they're both heavily targeted pieces of games that we probably want to stack this week.
You got something different, Devin?
Yeah. Depending on health, but I think a good fade of Tyreek Hill this week is Keenan Allen if he's active. He missed practice on Thursday, but 10 or more catches in each of his last 3 games. He's topped 100 yards in each of those games. So, you're saving $600. Not the worst play there. I think going back to Drake London, I do think he's a good play even in a bad matchup. I'll save my favorite one for whatever we do, value or whatever, because there is a good one. So you're going to want to keep watching this because it is a cash and GPP winner this week, assuming a certain player starts. I think Houston's receivers are just like where I struggle. And look, I know Tank Dell is getting all the popularity he should, but I'm just looking up the roster percentages I have between these two because Dell is at 13 and Collins is up there. But I think Collins has as much upside as Tank Dell. I know that the results necessarily haven't reflected that, but we've seen big games from Collins. They've just been a little less frequent. So if I look at FanDuel in particular, he's $600 cheaper. He's $7,600. I think Nico Collins is a great play over there. Not so much on DraftKings, just based off of his price. And then, yeah, I'll save it. Let's go to tight ends.
So my concern, a couple other names. My concern on Collins would be the matchup with Surtain from Denver, the corner. I'm a little bit worried about that. Noah Brown, if he's back, I mean, we saw that incredible run he was on at 4,500. Curtis Samuel at 4,100. That's a little bit risky, but I like that in a GPP play. He had 9 catches, 100 yards last week. Greg Dortch, 3,700. Again, another little bit of risky play, but he's gotten heavy volume the last couple of weeks. Jalen Guyton at 3,300, and then A.T. Perry at 3,300 are other names that I'm looking at GPP. And I'd be remiss to not mention Amon-Ra St. Brown at 8,500. I think going up against Marcus Lattimore being out in that Saints matchup. We talked about the Saints and the Lions being a potential shootout spot. I like Amon-Ra St. Brown this week. We can go to tight ends.
I'm so happy you didn't mention the name that I was about to. That would have just been like a complete killer.
I gotcha. Don't worry. ESPN, we got it.
We don't prep for this show at all, so like we're just winging it. And I'm just like, please don't say his name. Please don't say his name. Please don't say his name. You didn't, thankfully. We're just the wavelengths are on. We're good here.
Yes. Tight ends. Who you got?
Sam Laporta, 5,600. I like the Lions Saints game. I like the matchup for Laporta. No team has allowed more DraftKings points to tight ends over the last 5 weeks than the Saints, which amounts to about 60% more than league average. Other than that, if Dalton Schultz does find his way back into practice tomorrow, I think I would take the ownership discount on him. People will be afraid of that injury, but Denver is the best opposition matchup for tight ends on the season, and it would be a shame if Dalton Schultz were low owned in that spot.
Yeah, I think he's good. Looking at who else is out there, it's hard because, could you take George Kittle at 6,200 and be completely different? Probably. We talked about Brock Purdy, and that's a decent stack there, but paying 6,200 for George Kittle just seems like it's a little expensive. Njoku is in play. Tyler Higbee's at least intriguing. Probably not, though. And then this is where Pat Freiermuth comes into play. I think that he is a solid play this week, particularly as if you have a glove on, you can't throw the ball as far. So he's going to throw to his tight end.
All right, that means that we can go to one of our favorite segments of stacks for this week. Devin, who is your favorite stack this week?
Yeah, favorite stack. I think it's Brock Purdy and Brandon Ayuk. I said everything that needed to be said at the top as far as Ayuk, or as far as Purdy goes. I think he's one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL. And he just doesn't get nearly the respect that he deserves. I do think one other one I'll throw out there just because is obviously the Miami one, but I'm going to skip that for now. Let's go Let's go with Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown.
There we go. Phil, who do you have?
I'll take the other side of that one. Give me Carr, Kamara, Olave if he plays, Jawan Johnson if Olave doesn't play. And if they're both active, I'll probably even run some triple stacks out there with Carr, Johnson, Olave, and Kamara. And then bring it back on the other side with Gibbs or Laporta, who I like better at their prices than Amon Ra. But you could definitely get St. Brown in one of those lineups too. There's enough salary, so I just like the game. I want to go like 5 deep on a game stack of that one.
Mine is going to be Sam Howell and Curtis Samuel playing on the opposite side of that Miami side. It is a little bit risky to go with Samuel relative to Terry McLaurin or some of the other receiving options, but early in the season, he was a major focal point of that offense. He was injured, kind of took some time to get up to speed. He had a great game last week, and so let's ride the hot hand again there. Now, everybody's favorite part of the show. It's time for our discount plays. And since Devin has the most amazing discount play, we'll allow him to go last so that we don't take it from him, or maybe we do take it from him, and we'll see what that.
I hope you guys do.
But Phil, lead us off.
For the quality of this show, I hope you guys take it because I'll lose my mind.
It won't be me. I'm going to say that the best value play on the slate is Zach Moss because he is. But since it's kind of a cop-out to say that, I will give you Kenny Pickett.
Kenny Pickett. Okay, mine is going to. I want to risk it. I want to see if I can take Devin's. But if Amari Cooper is out for the Browns,
I hate you so much.
Cedric Tillman.
No.
All right, here we go. I didn't take yours.
So there is a wide receiver on the Cleveland Browns who has played 7 games with Joe Flacco. Every game he has 40 yards or more, including a 141-yard and a touchdown performance. That wide receiver's name is Elijah Moore at 3,500. Elijah Moore was a big reason that they brought Joe Flacco in. He was talking to the organization quite a bit as far as his familiarity with Flacco, his relationship with Flacco. Elijah Moore has been somewhat disappointing this year, which gives us a $3,500 salary. I just kicked myself off the stage by hitting the space bar. I don't want people to know about this play. No, look, if he gets 40 or 50 yards and 4 or 5 catches, which I think is probably his floor, 9 points at 3,500, you're in great shape. If he gets more than that, if Amari Cooper is out, you could see a 100-yard game from Elijah Moore if Flacco's starting. I think I'm pretty confident in that. Phil is probably cursing because he's a Jets fan and he's jaded. But again, Flacco has 285 yards passing in 4 of his last 5 games. Is he going to turn the ball over? Yes. Do turnovers hurt your quarterback stats? Kind of, sort of, not really, because, yeah, you throw an interception, it's -1 or whatever it is, but you get the ball back and you start throwing again, especially if they score off of that. Like a pick six is your best friend if you're starting a quarterback. So I think it's a great spot for Moore at 3,500 on a week that we've talked about there being such little value in us wanting to pay up to Christian McCaffrey and Tyreek Hill and maybe Keenan Allen and like these other expensive guys. I will have a lot of Elijah Moore. Cedric Tillman's not bad either, but Elijah Moore's where it's at.
Well, I'm glad that we went that direction. So
I
give you the initial shock, and then I let you.
I think you knew what you were doing, but that's
all right. So that's what we got for everybody. Make sure to like and subscribe. Good luck this week, Devin. Why don't you lead us out on some words of wisdom?
No, I think being smart is like it's obvious, but like don't just follow people to follow people. Like I'll say over at Football Guys, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are reading the same article. There are thousands, some might even say 10,000 people who are listening to this on audio and YouTube and other platforms. All of those people some of those people are just going to listen to the exact same thing and fill in a lineup that reflects what we're saying. Think critically Think about what you're trying to do, what you're trying to build. Don't just follow people to follow them. Like, actually try and learn what they're saying, try to learn their processes, and try and create one for yourself. I think that's the best way. Yeah, I give out my FanDuel lineup every single week, and some people play that, and that's fine. But where I like to see is like, hey, I really liked your lineup, but I deviated in these couple spots, and I did a little bit better. And it's like, I love teaching the game more than necessarily just here are picks, play them. Really trying to teach and learn and interact with everybody. So if anybody has any questions, comments, I think we're always on social media, on the YouTube comments, post below. And with that, like, the season's almost over, guys. It's week 13. Enjoy it. It goes faster than you think. College football is almost done this weekend. So enjoy it. Once the holidays come, it becomes harder to really like just sit down and watch a game and take it in. So it's over before you think. And with that, I wish everyone a happy week 13 and the best of luck.